time for is crime and punishment. So the specification says is to look at the ethical debate about crime and punishment, meaning is crime and punishment in Islam okay? Is it fine? Or is it harsh or barbaric? Does it have a place in society today or not? So let's break down the specification and see exactly what the specification requires you to know. First is what does it mean by the ethical debate about crime and punishment? The key Islamic teaching is that there's no punishment in the afterlife if a Muslim gets the punishment in this world. Number two is the ethical debate. Muslims will say the reason for crime and punishment is to keep social order of Sharia. I'll talk about more of that in the second point. Number 3 and 4 is the most important. The ethical debate that, wait a minute, if Islam is a peaceful religion, Islam is a religion where Muslims will say it means peace. It talks about forgiving. It's talking about giving chances. It talks about God being all merciful or loving. Then why is there punishment in Islam? So that's the debate there. That on one hand, is it the right thing to do? Is the punishment the right thing to do if Islam considers itself to be a peaceful religion? Number 2 is if Islam is the perfect way of life, then why are there inhumane punishments? Muslims will say that the Quran is the guide for Muslims, Prophet Muhammad is the perfect role model, and Sharia itself is a path to paradise. But then why is there inhumane punishment such as, capital punishment, amputation of the hands, and there have been reports of, stoning, lashing, whipping, all of these. So that's the ethical debate. The ethical debate is that, is it the right thing to do? Is it right? What's the deeper meaning behind that? Number 2 is in the specification, it says to know the traditional Muslim views about punishment for crime. So what are the traditional Muslim? Traditional means what were the views of crime and punishment and crime in the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So number 1 is punishment for crime can be found in the Quran and Hadith. There's no beating around the bush. It's there. It can be found in Quran and Hadith. Number 2, Islam accepts the need for crime punishment. That humans are going to commit crime. Why? Because there's free will. Humans have given free will. They follow their temptations. They follow their ego. Greater jihad links to greater jihad. And because of this, jealousy, enviness, that's why they're going to commit crime. As a result, there's a need for punishment. Number 3, that Islam believes that it is just. And a just religion, just society is in need of punishment to keep social order. That punishment, number 1, keeps social order, and number 2, it provides justice. If someone's house is stolen, then the just thing to do is to repay them back, to find the perpetrator and get them to repay the goods back. So that is the justice of Islam, and that's the traditional views. The main reason is to uphold the fundamentals of Sharia, which are the freedom of life, freedom of honor, meaning in terms of a person's integrity, freedom of education, intellect, and religion. The whole purpose of having crime and punishment is to protect the fundamentals of Sharia law. And traditional teachings of Sharia are categorized into 3 types, which are in the next box. So a question comes about traditional teachings. You could talk about the philosophy, the reason for punishment for crime, and then go into detail about the categories of punishment. So number 1 is qisas. Qisas literally means to retaliate, to have revenge. Okay. In Islamic terms, it means that a person retaliates or get retribution for a crime that is committed against them. Yeah. Evidence in the Quran where God says eye for an eye, life for life. Okay. A Muslim has 3 choices in the qisas. Number 1 is eye for an eye, so get the exact revenge that has happened to them. So the case study of the woman in Iran who was thrown an acid attack. So exactly the same way, acid attack could be thrown, or something similar like this could happen. Okay. The second option is diya, which is blood money. So they don't get the life for life, but instead they give compensation. They give money. Now, as I've explained before, This would be useful if it's a mother who's got young children, the father is killed, and now instead of taking the murderer's life, they expect the murderer to pay them monthly fees in order for them to keep the upbringing, keep the house, pay the bills, and so forth. Okay, so that's the second option, and the third option is forgiveness. Yeah, forgiveness, and that's the third option that the perpetrator, the victim, can give. Okay, now, the thing about Qisas is that it moves the options away from the judge, it moves it away from the state, and it gives it to the victim's family or the victim themselves. So the concept of justice is felt because the person is in control of what they could do and what they can do. The second type is hudud. This literally means to go beyond the limits, and this is where the crime and punishment is found in the Quran. For example, it says if a person is steals something, then amputate their hands. If two people are committed zina, adultery, then lash them 80 times. Okay, if they have four witnesses. So hudud is very strict. The boundary is high. The crime is found in the Quran. The punishment is also found in the Quran, and I've given a few examples for it. The Prophet Muhammad did say, ward of hudud as much as possible, meaning trying your best to find excuses as much as possible. One of the scholars of the past, As-Subki, he says there are 63 conditions for hudud to take place. In the Ottoman Empire, there was very minimal hudud that took place. Even in the Prophet Muhammad's time, there was hardly any hudud, capital punishments, anything like this that took place. The boundaries are kept extremely high for hudud. Lastly is ta'zir. Ta'zir is when the crime and punishment is not found in the Quran. It's left at the discretion and the option of the qadi. Okay, so like speeding fines, cyber crimes, they would come under ta'zir. Okay. Now the next part of the specification says a comparison of different views about death penalty. So number one is the modernist view. That's Tariq Ramadan, who's a modernist. So he argues that death penalty should be paused at this moment of time. Yeah, he says it shouldn't be abolished, but in fact it should be paused. The reason why is because he argues that the death penalty is used for different purposes. There's no sincerity. It's used by states to get rid of their opponents and to just wipe out people they don't like. So he says that in today's world, today's day and age, there shouldn't be any application of death penalty, and it should be paused. Traditionalists would argue against him by saying that the Quran is universal and we can't just pause God's laws. God is all wise, He's the creator, He's the sustainer, and it's not up to human beings not to pause His laws. Number two is a traditionalist, and he says in the specification, Sharabazi. So he says, yes, it should take place, eye for an eye, life for life. Whatever is said in the Quran, that's how it should take place. Obviously, with the specific conditions, following through how Islam has given the conditions. His argument is that when a person commits a crime against a citizen of a state, it is like they are committing the crime against the state itself. So, as a result, the state can act in self-defense, and them acting in self-defense is them giving the punishment. Okay, so Sharabazi argues that. Dr. Akhtar also argues that it's fine and it should happen because it's mentioned in the Quran, and the Quran is universal word of God and there's wisdom and reasons behind it. Last one is James Rachel's views, and he's a non-Islamic scholar, so he's a utilitarian who built on Bentham's idea of the greatest happiness, the greatest good is where the greatest happiness lies. So he says that depends on the people, depends on the situation. That if majority of the people feel that this person deserves a crime, a punishment, then it deserves it. If it makes majority of the people happy, then we should go for it. As we find in USA, many states, different states have different laws. Yeah, it depends on the greatest number of people. That's where the ethical reasoning lies for them. Okay, so scholars' views, the many scholars' views in this one. So I just put those scholars' views there. Key quotes: life for life, pardon and forgive. Yeah, that's very important. At the end of the day, pardoning and forgiving. We looked at the infits. This one, Tariq Ramadan, modernist, Sharabazi, traditionalist. In terms of Sunni and Shia, you could say that these were the Sunni views. So Sharabazi is the Sunni view. The Shia view would be that the the judge would base its laws on what the Ayatollah says. So if the Ayatollah was a traditionalist who agree with it, they would go with that. If the Ayatollah is modernist, then they would go with that. Nowadays, in this day and age, the Ayatollahs are traditionalists, so they would accept it. They would say yes, capital punishment should take place. So as a result, Shia and Sunni would agree to a large extent with the crime and punishment, such as capital punishment. Okay. Lastly, it links to ethics significantly. So utilitarianism, yeah, I've mentioned it here. Does it agree with the Islamic view or not? Um, you could argue that the, James Rachel Eve, his view on utilitarianism is against the Quran, because the Quran is, the Muslims will say that all the laws are correct, regardless of people like it or not, is always correct. Whereas in utilitarianism is depending on the people. Okay, so as a result, it won't match up in that sense. Okay, you could also link it to the Amnesty International, the Equality Acts. You could talk about the secular society today. In terms of the AO2, what are the key debates that are here? So if you just look over here, the key debates are the effectiveness of Islamic ethical teaching as a guide for living for Muslims today. Now over here, it doesn't mention capital punishment; it's kept it open. Yeah, but what the examiners are hoping you would do, or what you should do, is link it to capital punishment. So the question technically is the effectiveness of Islamic ethical teachings on capital punishment as a guide for Muslims even today. So can the capital punishment be used to um, the teachings on capital punishment, can that be used by Muslims today? Okay, so for example, can the capital punishment be used by Muslims in UK today? Can it be used by Muslims around the world today or not? Okay. And number two is the extent to which Islamic teachings on punishment can be applied today. So can these punishments be applied today or not? The first question you could say is a bit more broader. It's a bit more broad. You could talk about whether Islamic teachings on Islamic teaching as a guide for living for Muslims today, so such as if you were to move away from the capital punishment part, you're talking about transaction, you're talking about food, you're talking about drink, you're talking about dress, you're talking about fasting, prayer in the society today. So can those teachings across all those, can Muslims really adopt it in today's life or not? Okay. Yeah, today's was short, so this was the last one on theme 4. So the entire theme 4 would be done. So then there's 2 of theme 3, 2 of theme 2, and 2 of theme 1 remaining. Thank you very much.